So perfect. Thanks for being here today with us. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce this meeting. Rick and I will want you firmly to have this one, which is on a very hot topic, such as cybersecurity and blockchain, into the supply chain context. So it's my pleasure to welcome you here today. We have three guests. We have Christine, Randy, and Michele from Italy. This is a good friend of mine. So Eric, let's kickstart maybe with the introduction of the speakers today. I'll handle these back to you. Thanks everybody.
Thank you, my friend. I hope that you can reach out to Michele and see if he's having technical issues, but we're all right. In the meantime, hi again. I am Eric. I'm the CEO of the Blockchain Supply Chain Association. Our association is pretty much what the name says, about enabling blockchain technology, distributed ledger technology, and emerging technologies in a supply chain context. Everything we do, everything we have, everything we wear, the computers, the phones we look at too often during our day, that's all about supply chains, right? Parts come from everywhere in the world. They're carried on ships and planes and trains and trucks and courier, and that's logistics, and manufacturing is supply chain. So everything we do is about supply chain. Everything around us is about supply chain. Supply chains we've seen in the last few years have become very critical. And more importantly, and let me share a quick story or a quick screenshot. Where's my screen here? So let me share my desktop for you here. So we are here today to talk about cybersecurity in your supply chain. Again, the association here is about technology in supply chain context, and technology is very critical to move stuff forward. But when it goes bad, it can go bad, real bad. On screen here, if you can see my desktop, can folks see my desktop? Awesome. A couple of different examples of cyber attacks in a logistics and supply chain context. So I don't know if folks who have been in logistics for a few years remember the big cyber attack on Maersk, one of the biggest shipping lines in the world, brought them down globally, cost them something like $300 million, I think. Just this month or in the last month, big manufacturer, Bombardier, who does the skidoos and the sea-doos and all the cool toys we've bought because we had nothing better to do during pandemic. Well, they were cyber attacked, and ransomware attack closed down their manufacturing globally. A few months ago, AGCO, a big agriculture company, another big global company, their production was shut down globally again because of ransomware attack. So technology is real cool, but it can go bad real fast. And here today, we have an incredible lineup to tell us about what we should be doing in our supply chains, not only our logistics supply chains, but our technology supply chains, our software supply chains, and what to look forward when we are considering emerging technologies like blockchain. So that being said, I will shut up now, hand it over to Christine. Christine, please introduce yourself, and I'll start sharing and hand everything over to you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Christine Gadsby. I'm the Vice President of Product Security here at BlackBerry. And one of the hats that I wear is to help BlackBerry understand how, the place that they play in the supply chain is critical, and no better place is it critical than what we're talking about today. So hopefully you can see my screen. I'm going to start a little bit by saying, there's a lot of hats that you have to wear when you understand how the supply chain works and how software security works within the supply chain. And the key takeaway in the beginning and how I think about this is to remember that the ultimate liability lies with the supplier. So, we have, I can't remember what year it was, but, years ago, Ford with Model T, when the vehicle was first released, there's a story about how the tire blew out, and, there was injuries, and they were held liable for the tire, even though they didn't produce the tire, which kind of set precedence going forward. And while that's an old story, it's a relevant one because, in the supply chain, the supplier is the one that's responsible. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the industry and why this is just a hot topic right now in the industry in general, in the software side of the supply chain. There's an effort, and I'm sure that you've heard about it, but it's the US government's executive order on cybersecurity, or executive order EO, or executive order 14028. And it's really the government's attempt to do, what we as suppliers have been doing for a long time, which is trying to regulate and mandate there's actually security built in within the software supply chain. And all of that points back to the NIST Secure Development Framework Guidance, or Cybersecurity Supply Chain Risk Management Practices, or NIST 800-161. So again, really what that's doing is it's forcing secure development standards across supply chain practices. And what's most interesting about EO 14028 and what we've been dealing with for the past year is it's gating procurement for government software. So the US government's really put a stake in the ground and saying, we are adopting zero trust standards. If you want to sell software into the US government, you will meet these, all of this section's asks, or we will gate you at procurement. So that's really different. That's not an ISO standard where, as a company, you can go out and pay a third party to come in and sort of look what you do and sort of stamp approval. This is different. So this is actually using attestation. So documents that we're going to have to, as software suppliers, kind of put into the industry to say, we do all of these things that we say we're going to do. And then those artifacts acts as the enforcer with potential penalties for violating federal acquisition regulations. So it's very critical and very serious to software suppliers that they, if they plan to sell government software, that they take a look at this. And since then, we've seen the EU try to adopt, similar language, and even Canada, following up with similar language. So that's all pointing to, the supply chain itself. It's trying to regulate itself, which is a good thing. And really, what it's trying to ask and trying to understand is, if I purchase your software from you and you're making a piece of software, what risk do you introduce into my supply chain from your supply chain? Regardless of what the software product does, regardless of the security functionality provides, what pure liability do I get out of bringing your supply chain into my supply chain? And it's really complicated. And so when I go on to talk to other executives and other people in companies that might not maybe be developing software, I have to, find some commonalities to explain why this is so complicated. So software, I look at this health bar. This is actually a picture of a health bar that I took out of my own cupboard. I like to eat healthy, and I also like to read labels. I have daughters, and I teach them how to read labels. And I look at this, and it's really complicated. And even though the package says it's a health bar, that means nothing until I turn over this, box of ingredients. And if I look at these ingredients, I see some things that I have to question. Maybe from first glance, peanut butter looks fine, but if I'm allergic to peanut butter, then I need to know that. But I see the word artificial, and then I kind of have to say artificial what? But, I also see B12. I like vitamin B12, and I think vitamin B12 is a good thing. So the software ingredients list in a piece of software reads a lot like this. It's just very complicated, right? So in order to continue that conversation, I like to look at it in 3 different ways. There are more than 3. But for a basic conversation of how you need to lead a business, I like to look at it as the responsibility of a software producer. So somebody putting artifacts together to do a thing, a software supplier, which is the person selling the software, which might not be the software producer, and then a software consumer. So somebody purchasing software from another company. And in this case, for the purpose of this conversation, they're also adopting zero trust standards. So they're trying to take something like Executive Order 14028 or the US government's, road to adopting cybersecurity, and they're trying to put those best practices into their software consumption. So as a business. So the best way that I know to look at how complicated that gets under the 3 hats is to look at it like you're baking software in a kitchen. Hang with me. I know this is kind of, maybe a little bit rudimentary, but I like to do this because it breaks it down really easy and everybody can understand it. So, the software producer on the left part of your screen, they're baking software cookies. Their job in this menu is really to get the software to market as fast as possible, right? They're looking to use ingredients that create functionality. They're trying to create a piece of functionality with a piece of software. It might do a security thing. It might not do a security thing. It might be, tracking yellow paint. It might be doing anything, but their job is to make money, right? So their job is really to make money off those cookies and understand, how that functionality will work. But what we're not seeing is that that flour may be expired or that oven might be contaminated. It's really hard to tell. And so that's where the software producer is always challenged. Now, the software supplier in the middle, one of the supplier challenges is that the supplier might just work where that green spot is. They might just have one slice of the pie. They might be repackaging lots of productions. So they might be taking lots of cookies to make more cookies. They might add a different brand of flour. They might cook it longer. They might cook it again. So part of the challenge for them is, though, they're accountable for all the parts. So if that flour is expired on the software producer side, they might not know. They also might not know the package has leaked, or they might not know that things are contaminated below them. It's just kind of how it works. So on the third box over here, what does the consumer want? Well, the consumer wants, obviously, especially if they're doing, blockchain technology or they're adopting zero trust standards, they want the perfect cookie, right? They're assuming that the supplier and the producer and all of the things down the line are accountable for their security practices. But to be honest, it's really hard to tell. So they want the perfect software bill of materials. They want, they want it to pass all of the tests. They want fresh ingredients. They want a cookie that looks good. They don't necessarily, again, know the supply chain and what's in it, but they want to understand, what risk am I inheriting? How many flour sources were there? Where did those flour sources come from? Were they in Canada or the United States of America, or was that from a different geolocation? Or who's touched it since then? How do I look at the provenance and the pedigree of what I am actually consuming into my environment? So that sets up the really one common ingredient, which is the software bill of material, which is where a lot of the industry on the software side, in my end of the world, is really focusing a lot of effort on. And the software bill of materials is really where, in software security, at the architecture path, is causing a lot of operational problems we need to solve, right? So the software bill of materials is a really unique, it's a really unique way to track that software supply chain. It does look at libraries used from untrusted and unverified or verified open source projects, which is great. But it also depends on the dependencies in your software, and it creates a lot of challenges while it solves a lot of problems. So within your software bill of materials, if in part of the executive order, it's requiring us to release the software bill of materials if you're going to comply with the standards in the executive order. And so one of the challenges that provides is it doesn't tell the whole story. So a software bill of materials doesn't necessarily tell your consumer that you have cherry-picked fixes in a version of software. It doesn't tell that story. It only shows the components, so it doesn't necessarily say where the vulnerabilities are in the components. It just says you have the component. The other thing is, it might show version old of a particular version of software in your bill of materials, but it doesn't say if it's being called, or it doesn't say if it's accessible. It doesn't say that that functionality hasn't actually been ripped out by the compiler. So it leaves a lot of things to be given context to, which then creates noise, which is really tough for a software supplier or a software consumer or a software producer to understand. What is my responsibility to the end purchaser of my software, to knowing what to do? So I want to talk a little bit about what that means for you, and what the business decisions that you need to start making for yourself wearing any of those hats, because it is a business decision. First, if you don't have a PSERT, which is Product Security Incident Response Team, that's, the first thing that you need to know, that acronym. And really, I put Hug Your PSERT here because they really take the lion's share of this in any software company, whether they're responding to customer questions or they're producing customer questions on behalf of other vendors. Again, understand that software bill of materials doesn't tell the whole story. but you as a software seller have to answer for it. So, you know, again, it's a list of components like flour and sugar, but it lists things that could be false positives that you're going to need to understand. Also know that this impacts the concern of named vulnerabilities. So, you know, for a long time in the software industry, you know, we had, you know, Log4j, Log4Shell, Heartbleed, all those famous names that you hear. What that's really doing now, though, is it's taking out that time sequence. So if your customers and consumers have access to your bill of materials, they're going to know that you're potentially impacted by all of those things, maybe before you do. So right now, how that works in the industry is, you know, something like, you know, Log4Shell hits the press, and then companies are kind of racing around to figure out, you know, does my software and market have that impacted library, or as a consumer of software, do my vendors have that impacted library? That space and time is gone. So when you think about that, your consumers are going to know maybe before you do, again, you know, whether or not you have that impacted library in your software or not. So that's really important to be able to wrap your arms around as a company consuming or supplying software or in the supply chain. And then again, if you're a seller, you're responsible for that. So you're going to need to know, you know, what your binaries look like and what they look like in market to be able to respond for that. And then lastly, again, just being able to remember that it is your responsibility to respond to your customers. So what can you do today? These are just some points that, you know, kind of where we started to try and grapple with all of this, because it is a lot of operational change. Again, read Executive Order 14028, pay special attention to Section 4 if you are a software developer. I'll get into that in another bullet point here. And then Section 2 if you are a software supplier. And then be able to explain why this is different and why gating procurement is different than, say, an ISO standard where you're shipping off a, you know, a certificate of, you know, I did that SOC 2 thing. This is completely different. You know, software suppliers, decide what products are going to be in scope for your executive order response. That's really critical. You might not want to ship a software bill of material to every single person on the planet. You might want to limit it. You need to decide what the controls are going to be around that, because remember, it is the contents of your software that you're shipping out the front door. Scan binaries, catalog, repeat, know your attack surface, know what's in market, know what's in that software bill of material, know what vendors you're consuming from. And if you don't have that functionality, now is the time to start building that. That takes quite a while if you're starting from nothing. Make sure that you have a software development lifecycle policy. So if you don't have DevSecOps built into your development lifecycle, make sure that you have that. Make sure you have PCERT functionality. That's a big one, and it should be separate from your corporate mandate. So corporate security and, you know, this product security stream should be separate so that you understand where the liability is coming in and where the front door is. And then design, develop, build, maintain. So a lot of people that I talk to in the industry, the first time they're finding out kind of what that vulnerability landscape looks like is when they're creating a software bill of material for the first time. Don't have that be when a customer comes back and says, why does your SBOM look like that? Because it's a lot of work and it can take a long time to build that. So just make sure you're thinking about some of those things now. Software producers, look at that full SDLC. Make sure those build environments are secure, because the attestment goes all the way into the build environment. And prepare to continually attest. So if you're using the continuous, you know, CI/CD model, or you're using, you know, whatever model you're prepared to, make sure you can attest, because the attestment's ongoing. It's not a one-time snapshot, it's an ongoing thing. And then again, incident response. So the industry is looking at machine readable language to both look at this from a software producer and a software consumer. So start looking at things like CSAF and VEX. At the end of my slide deck, which I'll go into here in a second, I do have links for this. So the Common Security Automation Framework, and then VEX is a document you can produce to identify some of those false positives in a machine readable way, because otherwise, you know, it would be really hard to respond to all of that. And then lastly, and then I'll go on to my next slide with some of my with some of my takeaways for you is please don't wait for the US government to drive adoption. While we are looking at FAR language for this in the US, and there's, OMB is working on guidance, don't wait for the industry to be slow to respond, because they're not being slow to respond. We're already talking to customers who have asked us what our plans are as a company. So highly regulated, financial, medical, they're all involved in this very deeply, and they will be holding suppliers accountable. And then lastly, again, get involved. So there's lots of ways as a company, whatever hat you're wearing, the producer, the consumer, the supplier, lots of things to do here. There's a link in the back of this deck to the summary of Executive Order 14028. There's a great one-pager. It's great for executive discussion. I've used it a lot internally. I've used it a lot externally. It's fantastic. There's a larger document link there. There is a link to the Secure Development Framework Guidance, which your development team should definitely be familiar with that. Use that to build an SDL if you don't have one. There's links here to the NIST guidance for supply chain risk management, a great link to a talk at RSA from our friend Bob Martin at MITRE for his system of trust, which is where this is built from. And then an overview from the Common Vulnerability Reporting Framework, and also from CISA's VEX effort, which is, again, how do we document kind of the false positives where the vulnerability framework's going to pick up stuff and then we need to respond as a company. Minimum elements for an SBOM are also here, which is critical to be industry standard there. And then lots of great working groups from the NTIA. They have been so fantastic about providing us in the industry ways to engage, ways to be part of the solution to make sure that our voices are heard, and also just to learn from the industry, because it's, as we know, software security is sort of something we're learning as an industry as we go. And so that has been very, very helpful. And then some open source tools. So Cyclone DX, SPDX, which is a common, which is a language that is being standardized on. A link from GitHub's open source management, which is fantastic, and then some OWASP security tools. So that is all the time that I have, and hopefully a lot. I know it's a lot to dive through. It's a very complicated subject, but Eric, I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Christine. Yeah, that is a lot to digest, but great content. The key here, I think, is get involved, right? So do your homework right away. Don't wait. Start looking at stuff. We've all seen supply chains, my side of the supply chains, be critical, right? Over the last few years, and when they go wrong, they go really wrong. Don't wait for your supply chain, either goods or software, to go wrong. Do your stuff right away. So thank you very much, folks. If you have questions for Christine, put them in the Q&A. We're going to reserve some time at the end of the session for some answers. So thank you very much, Christine. Up next, Randy.
Hi.
Please introduce yourself, Mr. Randy.
Sounds good. Good day. I'm just going to get to my slide deck here so you can see that. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm the senior cybersecurity advisor for Rogers Cybersecurity Catalyst. I've been involved in cybersecurity for quite some time. My initial exposure to this was in the military. I'd had a number of security roles, physical personnel and communications security roles. And then I got into information systems security officer role, and then subsequently to that, information operations, which was basically my indoctrination, and that was in the 90s. So I've been around the game for a little while. My focus is on training and education, cybersecurity training and education, and also cybersecurity management. So what I'm going to cover today is a little bit about emerging tech and cybersecurity, and roll that in and have discussion around the supply chain issues. First of all, I want to sort of expand a little bit on what Christine was talking about, and really applaud her for setting up those resources. Those are all excellent resources, and a great explanation of the software supply chain. We'll touch on SDLC, and something we call and we hear about a lot is building security, and we'll define that a little bit as we move along here. So this is going to take you to more of an organization-centric view. So what is your organization doing? You're either a producer, a supplier, or a consumer, and you're probably more than one of those. You're probably a consumer. You certainly consume certain things So what do these things mean to you in the general sense from an organizational perspective? And then how does that relate to other parts of your supply chain? And I'm going to specifically target out first cybersecurity, IT, and cloud security providers as a unique set of suppliers to you. And then I'm going to look at other suppliers and partners that you may be working with. And then what you provide further on actually extends from these discussions as well. So how you relate to your consumers or your suppliers has stemmed from that. So first thing we're going to talk about is I'm going to deal with the big four. There are tens of different emerging technologies, and the calendar on this keeps on changing every day. But I'm going to talk about the four big emerging technologies that are basically having a significant impact on cybersecurity today. First is 5G, quantum, artificial intelligence and machine learning, and then automation. And I'll talk about a few others, just a few details about a few others. But when I'm talking about the big four, what are your cybersecurity challenges and what can you do about them? Those are what we're going to cover in those four. And we need to be thinking about these now. If we're not already thinking about them, we're already too late in some cases, and we'll talk about that. The next thing is working with third parties. So I'm going to talk to you about third parties in general. It's only going to be a short discussion, but basically what should I be concerned about in my business and how can I minimize the risk? So these, you're going to, as you go through, if you're paying attention, you'll catch some common elements, and we'll wrap them up with some key takeaways after everything is done. So first thing is the big four. First one off the gate is 5G, and we're moving into 6G. We're exploring 6G. And what does 6G or 5G provide us? And we don't know exactly what 6G is going to provide us, but we could just figure that it's going to be multifold more of what 5G is providing. We get certainly an increase in speed, reliability, and reduction in latency, which basically helps to provide us with significant improvements on quality and quantity of data across our networks, right? And the bandwidth and the amount of data that can follow. And what does this mean from a threat perspective? Okay, well, first thing is, and you'll hear this throughout, is every time a new technology comes out, not only does it provide us opportunities and benefits and business expansions and things like that, it increases the threat capability as well, right? If we have it, they have it, and they know how to use it often well before commercial and private sector businesses have a good handle on it. So it's going to increase the threat capability. It vastly increases the attack surface. Well, why does it do that? Because there is a broader range of or broader volume of data. It certainly is more enticing because there's more data going across networks. There are more devices and more connections, and these equal more vulnerabilities and increased impact. Edge computing here, what we're talking about is a remote operations, remote devices, et cetera, including remote users, okay, are going to be probably more susceptible to attack because they may not necessarily be prepared for 5G and what comes with that, and the volume of potential attacks that are going to be coming. And this also takes a turn back to your organizational network. So there's a potential for significant data siphoning from this if you don't plug all the holes. But the largest threats that are going to come to your organization are going to come from faster malware spreading across 5G networks. Certainly distributed denial of service. So taking your networks down or flooding your networks with information so you can't use them, and then cryptojacking, other cyber criminals basically delving in, trying to get your resources to use them for crypto mining. So those types of things are going to probably increase with the greater adoption of 5G networks across the nation and across the world. What can you do to it to help sort of survive this? The first thing is build security, and going back to Christine's comment about the SDLC, It works for both software and systems development. But beyond engineering, when we talk about building security, and it also means organizational processes, including administrative and management controls, not just technical controls, about your system, and make sure that you do a good job of identifying where you need security across your systems, networks, and devices. One of the things that will help to defray a lot of issues with the threat as well is using trustworthy cloud services that have standardized controls relative to that respond to the 5G requirements. The next thing is visibility. What are you using and where are your assets? You need to understand that so that you can understand what you need to protect. If there are assets, or if you're using 5G networks and you have remote operations or remote users, how are you protecting those? What kind of security software do you have on those systems? A lot of IoT devices, Internet of Things, Industrial Internet of Things, Internet of Medical Things, all these Internet of blank things. Very few of them actually come off the line with built-in security. So what kind of security do you need to build around that? Or is there a way to actually get it built or develop it with security built in? For those of you who are producers and you're looking at building IoT devices in this space to support supply chain security, what about building security? And that's going to be a competitive advantage to you nowadays, because more and more of this is a problem. Increasing security from the edge. In other words, making sure that those remote locations, those remote devices, all sensors and things like that that can feed back into your network have a requisite amount of security. And of course, additional monitoring at various interfaces across your network where you're looking at patching into other networks or other systems that will also be supporting or running through 5G networks. So the next one is quantum. We've heard a lot about it. There's some quantum deniers out there. I'm pretty confident that quantum is going to become a thing. And I suggest that you also consider that as a possibility as well, and something to be thinking about now, not 5 or 10 years from now. With quantum, what we're going to see is significantly increased processing speeds and computing power, well beyond what we currently know. And this is going to create tremendous opportunities in the future. We don't know what those opportunities are yet, but we know they're going to be there. But what's this also going to do? Again, increase threat capability. Threat actors, once this is out in the commercial market, for sure they're going to have it. But even when nation states or large corporations like Google or whomever develops quantum computing capabilities, it's not going to be very long after where you're going to start to see other nation states and other organized crime outfits try to start leveraging this capability if they can. So that's going to be a problem. It's going to significantly increase the complexity of potential attacks, and the biggest thing is it's going to cripple encryption. All encryption in all public key infrastructure, asymmetric cryptography is going to be vulnerable, including blockchain. Okay, and I know maybe you don't want to hear that, but that's the case, and so that is going to be important. And every organization that has any kind of sensitive data, any kind of organization that uses encryption needs to be thinking clearly now about quantum, and we'll talk about what they need to think about in a few seconds. And the other thing is the steal now, decrypt later dynamic. So what's starting to happen, what you see is with certain threat actors, particularly certain nation states and such, who are thinking about different types of activity, whether it be in the commercial espionage space or intellectual property space or software space. They're looking at scraping the data, extracting the data now, even though it's encrypted, and they can't decrypt it now. But when quantum computing comes up, there will be decryption capabilities, and they'll be able to decrypt that information. So this is troubling as well. If you have information, data that you want to keep secret forever, this becomes problematic. So what can you do? First thing is a quantum threat assessment. Identify where you're going to have problems. What kind of quantum threat is there? Where is it going to potentially hit me? What kind of encryptions do I have? Encryption systems and processes and technologies do I have in place? And then think about what you need to do to integrate quantum safe texts and processes. NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the United States, is coming right now with some protocols and some technology nominees for technology and establishing standards for quantum safe technology. And Canada and other nations are also working heavily on this. So think about what those are going to be. They're not available yet, but start thinking about what you need to do and what kind of technologies you may be looking at and what kind of internal organizational processes you need to take care of. Leverage QS cloud services. There's no doubt in my mind that once quantum becomes a thing, and quantum safe standards have been identified, that the larger cloud services are going to be first past the post on trying to integrate quantum safe technologies so that they can continue with their business model. So you may be able to leverage those. And then protect your data now. Let's worry about the steal now, decrypt later thing a little bit as well. Put the appropriate wrapping and protection around your data, whatever those controls might be, so that you can protect your data moving forward. Okay, so the next one, artificial intelligence and machine learning. We all know a lot about this. It's broadly applicable there's a broad number of applications, and primarily the data is being used to expand machine decision-making, reduce the human effort, increase efficiency and capacity of our processes. And this includes things like automation, language operations, reducing human error, of course, and more expert functions with less human intervention. So these kind of advantages, we're all familiar with these. We're actually using technologies and software and such that have some AI components with them. It's not great yet, but it's getting there. And we're seeing this every day on TV. But what does this mean from a threat perspective? Certainly, again, okay, threat actors are already leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning for threat capability. It's increasing their ability to attack. They are leveraging AI for anything from vulnerability hunting to improved deception techniques on social engineering. And the other thing is as we're using AI and machine learning, it feeds off of data. It's data thirsty. So what that does is when we have a system or network set up, it means that we have other data points that the artificial intelligence or machine learning feeds from. And these access points are also vulnerable points, because often we don't think about them because they're feeding in from another system or another set of networks or algorithms or whatever, and we don't really clearly understand what's happening there. So we sort of ignore it. It's feeding us, but we don't understand that there's a potential vulnerability there. And of course, there's also the attacks to the data itself and the data models, which can either be disrupted or manipulated. And this can cause us no end of heartache if we're running our systems or our processes off of AI and using AI algorithms to keep our products and services to our clients effective and efficient. So what can you do? Well, one of the first things you should be able to do is test an AI and ML, including any biases that may be associated with the AI in your own systems. Make sure that the AI feeds and the data feeds and such are going to be secure. Make sure that there's no algorithmic problems. Make sure there's no biases associated to the AI that can corrupt your business and your services and your products. Again, build security in, right? Make sure that you have security around the data that the AI is going to be using. Monitor and manage access to those systems. And of course, you could also leverage AI and ML for security. There are a lot of cybersecurity providers out there that are already doing that, leveraging AI and ML in their security, and they'll be doing, and they use it quite a bit as far as signatures and signature patterns, anomalous detections, these types of things. So if you get involved with this and you're concerned about your existing security software, just check to see what kind of systems and support they're using, and see what kind of if there's some AI enablement going on there to help with detection, because it's far more efficient than humans. Again, it's still improving. It's not perfect, but it's getting there. Finally, in the big four, we're talking about automation. A lot of you are probably exposed to this in various terms. Certainly, if Automation means efficiency and capacity that we have never seen. It reduces human error and effort, and really it's the benefits are tied to how that automation is applied with different technologies or different processes. Basically, we're alleviating human intervention in the production and the delivery of services. So it has increasing influence on our businesses and our productivity. But what are the threats? The threats are, of course, increased threat capability. And in automation, what I'm talking about is automated attacks, in this case, bots. We've heard of bots. Bots are a form of automation. It's digital automation, and they are supporting that. And there are other ways that threat actors are using automation. Automation increases our attack surface, right? We have to have data flows to and from the automation in order for it to work. So that increases the interfaces on that automation, increases our attack surface. That provides points of vulnerability that we often don't think of. We throw automation in, we set up the systems, we connect it to our networks to make sure that we can remotely control it, whatever is necessary, whatever kind of controls we have in place, and then we don't think about the security around that. We are starting to now, but sometimes this happens and we don't think about it. So think about those, not just the pathways, but the points of access for automation. And here again, of course, the potential is for disruption and manipulation of the automation itself. This could include in total shutdowns, okay? And we've seen this happen before. So what can you do about it? So again, testing. Test automated processes and technology associated with it. Test the pathways too. Make sure that there's no vulnerable points for the interfaces between the automation and the networks that are supporting it. Know the interfaces, the external exposures. What kind of interfaces are there? What kind of external exposures might there be that can be leveraged, can be vulnerable to threat? And of course, I've said this again, build security. And when you look at adopting automation and automated processes, not only look at the efficiencies and the effectiveness of the automation and what it's going to bring to your business, but what kind of security do you need in order to support that and support continued availability of the data, continued integrity of the data, so that the automation can continue to run. You know what? The automation is not going to be helpful to you if it isn't available to you. So it's important to think about how we're going to build security into automation. So that covers basically the four big ones. There's a few others that just a brief discussion on, of course, blockchain. You understand blockchain being a part of this association. But I think the biggest thing there is the potential for blockchain to expand beyond cryptocurrencies and digital objects and digital signatures to include medical processes, copyright, digital accountability across all business domains. So that's going to be huge. It's potentially huge. The bad side of this, it also supports cyber criminal behavior, securing their financial transactions and making them virtually untraceable. So that again, this is a piece of technology that, yes, was intended to be secure and you provide for secure transactions, but the cyber criminal organizations and criminal organizations have figured out how to use this. Next thing down on the list is datification. Okay, leading into the same discussion around AI, data value is huge. And so we're seeing increased dependence on data to drive business, and it's also driving our behaviors and our lifestyles and things in our lives. So it's of increased interest to threat actors. There's increased threat of IP theft, corporate secrets, extortion, these types of things as a result of our reliance on data. And in fact, we also need to be concerned about, again, integrity and availability of that data for our business operations. Extended augmented reality, the only thing I could say here is that it depends on the application of use, and they're vast and some of them are highly technical. But how do we rely on it? What are our exposures? How does it connect to our networks? We need to understand that. And then we need to do the same sort of blanketing of security around this to make sure that it's not manipulated or disrupted in any way. And the same thing applies to 3D printing. Okay, these types of things that are coming out, these are examples of technologies that are coming out that are often being paired up with systems and networks and devices where we don't think about the network, about the security of the 3D printer itself, or the software in the 3D printer, or the networks and the systems connected to it. So these are all things that I'm hoping I'm sort of stimulating some questions around them, and that you've understood that basically we're looking at, you know, there are benefits, but there are also some threats, and most of the threat actors are taking advantage of these technologies at the same time. So we need to be thinking proactively about what kind of security we need around these things. So let's move on to third parties and supply chain quickly. I'm going to talk about this in there's basically two big areas here with respect to this. There's the cyber IT and cloud service providers as one part of the supply chain here that are providing services to you and to your organization, to many others. Then there's other suppliers and partners that you have that drive your business and support your business. And you are in fact probably a supplier or producer as well. So the big thing here is you need to be thinking about some common things across those two different entities, but there's some common issues. First is assess your compliance requirements and other jurisdictional considerations. You need to understand what you need to protect, what you're mandated by law to protect, and to what degree. And then how do these requirements extend into your supplier or partner agreements, whether they be IT suppliers or other suppliers, right? What if your suppliers or partners are in other jurisdictions? What are your obligations? What are their obligations? And in this case, when we're talking about compliance, one of the big things about privacy and the personal information, personally identifiable information, is that there should be some sort of high watermark across jurisdictions. So if you're in Canada, if you're a company in Canada, but you also have dealing with California organizations, or California organizations are part of your supply chain, they have a higher threshold of privacy requirements. So you may very well have to have a higher threshold of privacy requirements as well if you want to deal with California data, right? That's the kind of thing that you need to be thinking about. The same thing with GDPR, the General Data Protection Requirements in Europe. Okay, so set the bar based on the highest watermark of the privacy requirements as an example. So, and that pertains to every other kind of compliance requirement. Ensure you understand your own technical and threat context. Understand what you're going to be doing and how your system works and what your system connects to on the outside and what kind of threats are there, but also understand how your third parties provide either services for that or support that or flow data through those, right? So that you can understand what you need to protect there. Check for third-party and supplier certifications, attestations, and standards. Christine talked about this regarding attestations. Absolutely, look at these types of things. These are the things, whether it be a cloud service provider or your own industry provider. Think about what they need to be able to achieve in order to reach compliance, and then also what kind of level of security do you need from them in order to feel that you can maintain confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your systems. Carefully read service or product agreements. Make sure that your security requirements are well articulated in there, that you have the right clauses, and make sure that they see this, read this, and respond to this. Understand who has access to your data and systems, third-party suppliers, partners, etc., particularly the people. Are there screening processes in other organizations? Who has access to your data? Are you in a multi-tenant agreement within a cloud service, and there there may be not enough segmentation and enough security between your data instance and another party's data instance? You need to think about these things. Ensure you properly manage security interfaces and processes within the supply chain, right? Whether it's digital supply chain or a physical supply chain, what kind of security interfaces are there? What kind of processes are needed to be in place in order to ensure that you've got security coming in and then security going out, and security while you're processing it? So all of these things can be quite complex. what I recommend you do is that if you're not comfortable with a lot of these, certainly take this kind of list or other lists away and the stuff from Christine and go to your technical advisors and or local experts and say, okay, what does this mean? And how do we get to a better place than where we are? So the key takeaways are, one, there are benefits to integrating these technologies. Many of you out there in this community already understand that. But threat actors will also have access to these new technologies, and they'll know what to do with them, and they'll know how to subvert existing sort of frameworks in order to come in and take what they want. Basically, it's unfortunate, but that's what's happening. So, what do you need to do? Know what you have, do an asset inventory, and figure out what kind of risks are going to be there. Right? How do you manage those risks? What kind of security systems do you need to put in place? Understand the implications of integrating new technology. Do some sort of a risk assessment on the integration process, not just when it's in place. Consider integrating security before implementation. So when you have an implementation process, this goes back to what Christine was talking about with respect to SDLC. Consider integrating security before implementation and within your organization, or before you send it out the door, right? Leverage trustworthy third-party IT cloud cyber services for your own organizational security. They will certainly be able to help you and keep your head above water in this very complex and dynamic space. Understand the system of systems. Okay, who's supplying who, who's partnering with who, who's doing what. What systems do I rely upon for my business? What supply? How am I a supplier to others? What do we need to make sure that we have in place? Keeping in mind that as we look at technology and it evolves, suppliers and partners may change their technology, and we need to be responsive and understand what happened there and know the ripple effect that it could have on our own security. And then finally, keep an eye on the state of technology and what's happening out there. If you close your eyes for a minute, you're going to miss something. So I know it's a lot, but I just wanted to emphasize these takeaways. So looking forward to responding to any of your questions in the Q&A. And thank you very much for taking the time.
That was awesome, Randy. Thank you very much. I think you mentioned it. Bad people will do bad things no matter what technology we have. We have to do our homework because, it's going to happen, right? The other thing you mentioned, quantum, crazy stuff. I have a hard time wrapping my head around some of it, but it's already being used in a supply chain, my world supply chain context. And I was speaking with somebody last week who's using quantum today to model supply chain issues. So it's coming faster than we think. Thank you, Randy. Folks, keep your questions in the Q&A if you have some for Randy, for Christine, and for Michele that's coming up. With that, Michele, I will hand over the microphone to you.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Can you hear me and see my slides?
Perfect, awesome.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, I have my introduction here. I'm from Italy, Umbria, Orvieto. I'm from more than 25 years into high technology for University and Research Center, first now for enterprises. Now, actually, now I'm an advisor in cybersecurity and blockchain. I have those certification, but it's really interesting now to have this convergence to be able to support different operators to use both these technologies and emergency. What I want to follow with you is this pathway from cybersecurity dimension, following to cybersecurity and blockchain technology issues, the regulation or rules issues, and if now are we moving in the right way for the combination of cybersecurity and blockchain, then is open to your interests. Cybersecurity dimension will try to be really short, even if the dominion is really, really big, but I would like to show you that I'm using ENISA Threat Landscape 2021 and NATO Strategic Scanning 2030. So you can find by your own the specific data, but I can share with Eric to let him share with you. And the distribution of cybercrime is really, really, really big. You can see it's more than 86. Sorry, I need to act fast to follow the agenda. The victims are from a lot of places, but as you can see, they are changing different topics. So the geography is from all over the world, but Americas are at the first places, and EU and other places are following. But as you can see, the amount is, even if in the 2021 and maybe in 2022 is not growing up so fast. The reason is that the enemies are managing the way to fight us in these years. The techniques are something that I would say is not yet as full of specific innovations. They are using actually a lot of instruments that are on the place, on the desk since a lot of time, but they are changing the using of different instruments day by day, addressing our way to defend ourselves. As you can say, the techniques per here is changing actually. The surfaces of attack, to remark the synthesis of Randy, is growing up, is really, really growing up tremendously. And as you can see here, I don't want to be so technical about cybersecurity, but for sure, the places from where the attack is exploited is not necessarily or never, in most of the case, is not the place in which the enemies are sighted. Maybe the place from where the attack is used is the place weakened, more weak. And as you can say, Italy is not so in a good position. The global scenarios is really, really bad because the dimension of cybersecurity is growing up. The perimeter of cybersecurity is growing up really much. The surface of attack is tremendously growing up, and the severity is really, really a problem. The severity could be the multiplication by the threats plus vulnerability plus economics issue related to the exploited attack. What's the problem of cybersecurity in blockchain technology issues? I used this source. This is really, really recent. Is from July, August 2022, and I suggest you to search. Actually, the dimension or the minimum of cybersecurity issues or surface attack is really big and is growing up. To summarize, starting from blockchain system, we have two kind of approach, the public and centralized one, and we are going to find bridges between them, and the bridges on the interstitial spaces will be a problem to steal, hack, and falsification. The decentralized application, the smart contract, really big problem, really big problem. The consensus algorithms, really a big problem too. The networking issues, the block data issues, and so on. To talk about the other approach, public, organization, and individual as actors or stakeholder of blockchain. So the cybersecurity dimension of problem in the blockchain is really big, but it's growing up. The cybersecurity approach are, I don't want to say ready, but they are really, they are a lot, and they are mature enough. Talking about some of them, and we have a lot of starting point to do well for different topic or industrial area. But what we have no just really, or we are not agreeing about, is the security approach for blockchain. This is a big problem for me. And what we are trying to do, what you can say on a scientific paper I introduced it to you, is that a good approach could be, or a starting point could be, to think about cybersecurity problem for blockchain. Think about process data infrastructure, PDI. Process security, what does it mean? Or in what different items we can divide? Smart contract issues under the business level, virtual machine level, contract core level, or the implementing scenarios that the new technology this is arriving in new industrial topic, medical, city sharing, or IoT, or grid, or manufacturing. And the problem in standard regulation, we are really in a Western time of this issue, or fraud and risk management. Talking about on a focus of security new scenarios, we have this area of interest for our economic development: IoT, shared economy, medical systems, smart city, smart grid, social manufacturing, with a lot of issues totally opened. The data security area to approach the security in blockchain: access control, encryption on blockchain, which means homomorphic technology or methodology, multi-party computation, trusted computer, or retrieval techniques, or encrypted data on blockchain is problem. Signature schemas, we have to change these. For example, for the issue mentioned by Randy about quantum computing, that is arriving, or maybe it's just arrived, but we don't know. Privacy protection techniques, or consensus algorithms, which now are making a little focus. Thinking about the permissionless blockchain, we have a lot of issues related. 51 vulnerability attack, or problem about the tokens needs to be in the network, while some application doesn't require token, and so on. Proof of work, proof of stake, and distributed proof of stake are implemented kind of algorithm, consensus algorithm, which need to be studied and approached in a more efficient way for the security of the blockchain ecosystem as a whole. The same problem, or not the same, but with same emergency, is related to permissioned chains. About the infrastructure security, we can talk about private key management in user side. A lot of people use, for instance, wallet on network, or wallet on kind of devices which are not saved in a good manner. So this is a problem not only for the security of the money or crypto asset, talking about NFT for instance, of the user, but it's a problem of reliability of blockchain. It could be an obstacle to the growing up of blockchain. So it's a problem for the older shareholder and stakeholder of blockchain area. Terminal and network vulnerability, compliance enablement, and this is a big problem about how to share, how to agree about the rules, regulations, and framework. Summarizing, blockchain's issues is about process, data, or infrastructure, or those three could be a starting point. But we have no agreement about how to face in a standard way for the whole ecosystem, technical ecosystem of the blockchain. About the rules related to cybersecurity in blockchain, the source in this case is something that was admitted on 18th of June of this year, and you can search using these keywords. A meme, a firm grasp of security and intricacies of blockchain system and understanding how cybersecurity can be mitigated could determine the extent of acceptance of blockchain within the European community. And I had and beyond. Blockchain is over the borders. So we all, as we can see at the end of my slides, we all have to work together to use something that we or I can manage easily. Euro regulatory proposals are only proposal, market in crypto asset, pilot regime in DLT market, digital operational resilience, and so on. Malta, for instance, admitted a lot of good starting point to make a good regulation. The goals of this starting point of regulation is provide legal certainty, support innovation while mitigating risk, protect stakeholders, supporting the market, maintaining financial stability in EU. But are we moving in the right way? Because the background feeling is considering that cybersecurity as a precondition to sustainable innovation in the blockchain and crypto asset domain, we stress the absence of detailed guidance, security remedies, supervisory approach, and harmonization at EU level. We have good proposals, but nothing that is helping us in the detail when we start to work, when we want to do something, knowing how we need to act in a good way and preserving us and the others' safety. Gaps on rules, specific cybersecurity measure. What distinction exists between blockchain attacks and blockchain itself? Who are the threat agents? What kind of consensus design vulnerabilities we are facing using this or that one? Smart contract code review and assurance. This is really a big problem, because if the smart contract is a good novelty of permissionless blockchain, because it's immutable, the immutable itself is a problem, because if the code is buggy, it's really a problem to review and remedy the code, because it could be a way to create a fork for the blockchain itself we are going to use. What are the defense techniques? What liability measures we can expect from this new environment? Because the anonymity is another kind of novelty that we all appreciate, but it's a problem too. So, warning, the first one. However, the immutability nature of a smart contract code is a double-edged sword, providing user guarantees yet at the cost of inability to fix code, as we said. Deployed that maybe have bugs within. So our concerns are: blockchain poses novel form of cybersecurity risk not addressed by almost all rules. Due to digitization actions, which are growing, cyber risks are set to grow. We have no requirements needed for smart contract coding. It's really hard to apply liability measures and no schema for third-party cybersecurity requirements, almost in blockchain. We have for cybersecurity standard framework, for instance. Lack of harmonization on member states. For sure, the institutions that are working to build some regulation about it as some issues to fix or some constraints. We know that the decentralized nature of blockchain is a problem. Anonymity of network participants is another one. Cross-border nature of blockchain solution are for sure a problem that involves a lot of different parties. And the immutability nature of the smart contract code is another big issue which we need to face as soon as possible. Another warning. In other words, certain blockchain-based transaction seems to bypass current regulatory control, with at the same time it brings software quality and assurance at forefront, given the often immutability nature of code and inability to update code, even if bugged, as we said. My conclusion, we need to engage D stands for decentralized ecosystem and regulating this world. It could be naive leaving decentralized world into the hands of centralized regulators. What we need is an engagement of decentralized world as a whole, making the blockchain ecosystem reliable, accountable, and safe as to be primarily at their own interest. So the call to action is, if we consider a chain is strong as the weakest link, being a blockchain space, a worldwide ecosystem, all the countries have to think about common rules, framework, and strategies. We have to do it faster to not cause obstacles for novelties or damages while growing. New role for each one of us. If the centralized application roles avoid fate in a single player, at the same time, the dApps, the DAO, for their own prosperity, have to design and manage in a decentralized manner the fundamentals, values such as reliability, accountability, and safety of blockchain. A collaboration between centralized and decentralized one is really mandatory. Thank you.
And thank you, Michele. Lots of stuff to take in there as well. We'll be sharing those amazing graphics with everybody, those charts as well. Again, right? Do your homework. Make sure that you understand the jurisdictions that you're going through. But Christine, Randy, Michele, they all spoke about upcoming regulations about around cybersecurity. And I see from our participant list, we have some folks working on some blockchain platforms here, right? So make sure you understand where your software is going to go, what the impacts are going to be, who your partners are going to be, and do your homework and make sure you understand regulations. All right. Thank you very much, folks. We are kind of coming up to the end of the session. We have a few minutes for our Q&A. Let me go here. I see Linda, you've had your hand up for a little while. I hope the shoulder is still hanging in tough. Did you want to, let me see here, allowed to talk. Did you have a question for our panel, Linda? And you can unmute yourself if you want to ask that question live.
Yes, thank you. My question is for Christine. I think I have her name right. I'm sorry. I'm actually trying to recover from COVID, so I'm
Hello.
wanting to. It is Christine. Lovely. Really appreciate the detail that you went into and the focus that I've been seeing on the need to be prepared for quantum compute has been something that it's been a little bit daunting, because when you look out at the landscape of what is there that can help you come to market with something that is already quantum secure, there's just not a lot of options. So I was wondering if you had any recommendations, if you had any awareness of what those currently existing supports, tools, multi-key infrastructures, whatever there is that can be literally baked into a product to support that quantum readiness.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I am just sitting here sicker than a dog. So I appreciate that. I feel like I have this like cold voice right now. We're all in my house at the tail end of a sinus infection cold thing going around. So that's a great question. And I'm just going to tell you that everybody in the industry is challenged with the same thing, because where's the watermark? I think there are so many things happening that are regulating the need to build a widget, to be coming out the other side, to do all of these disparate functions and fashions and meet all of these things. How do you know where to bake that in? Which is, it's just a supply chain challenge. Again, wearing all the hats, you have consumers that want it one way. As a producer, you need to develop it one way. So the only thing that I can recommend, and recommend enough, is to understand the need to build the watermark, right? So if you're going to build a widget that has to meet this standard and it needs, FIPS 140-3 crypto, you've got to look far enough left to know what you're going to build in. I think the challenge necessarily isn't what to put in the widget. It's knowing how many things what's the widget going to meet, and where's that watermark, and where's the baseline that you set? What are you trying to build out the other side? I've seen so many companies try to go to market, and they want a thing. I guess the other side of that coin is, the security people building the software don't always understand those watermarks also. That's the other challenge, is finding the right translator. Right? Don't let that part of the process go unguarded. Make sure those feedback loops are open. Make sure you're asking the right questions. It's a mind meld of people. Just, the product developers don't necessarily understand, again, the need for whatever crypto modules need to go into that functionality to get the widget out the other side. So lean in and have those hard conversations and make sure that that's part of the STL. You have to do it in the design phase of the widget. Breaking up concrete's really expensive. That's, and there's no one,
Exactly.
there's no one size fits all answer to that. There's no one place to point you to say, okay, well, here's the thing. It really needs to just be a bigger part of the conversation, so that you're and again, acknowledging that conversation is to avoid breaking up the concrete. I need to make a product. It needs to do these things. I need all sides: functionality, design, threat modeling. Everybody needs to come to the table and have that conversation. Getting executive adoption is just critical. Just really critical. Have a plan, because it just takes a long time, I guess.
So the composable tech platform that would enable this doesn't yet exist, is what I'm hearing you say.
Well, I think it depends. I think, no, is there a one-hit wonder where you can just go out and don a magic wand? I wish I had it. If I did, wow, I would be amazingly powerful. I think it just depends on what you're trying to build and the market you're trying to sell into. And again, understanding the watermarks, they're always going to be different. It's a moving target. So the one size fits all approach doesn't really exist. It might later, but if I'm wrong, someone needs to tell me, because I will gladly be wrong, but no, it doesn't exist.
I know some people who are working to build it. So I've been searching for, does one already exist, for a while now, and I haven't found it either. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Get better soon, Linda.
Thank you.
And by the way, Christine, I hope that those cookies you had at the beginning and that concrete that you're speaking about were not in the same context, right?
No.
We want good cookies.
Yes, we do, and we don't want to have to break them up and rebake them. That's the, you want your cookies to come out the other side exactly how you intended to have them baked, which is always the challenge.
You bet. I think that also touches on the next question that we have from Esan here. Just pull that closer. To move towards digital supply chain, do you think we need to have a security platform that ensures the reliability of all software used in supply chain, or the security mechanism should be in place by the provider of each software, right? So, and then all encompassing, which is going to be hard, or put responsibilities on each of the participants. Who wants to take this answer?
If it's possible, I would like to say something. What I think it could be really interesting and powerful, but I think it's not easy to have only one instrument. What we need, what I think all we need is a set of rules, a way to build code. When I was writing the slides you have seen, I was thinking about a word that could be a way to summarize the way that, for sure, this is novelty, but we need to use ethics when we code for all the different solution we are coding for the blockchain specifically. Because once we release it, once we release on the blockchain, on a blockchain, Ethereum, Algorand, or whatever we want, and smart contract is really, really dangerous or quite impossible to remove without create a really big problem for the blockchain. So we need to think about a set of rules that we share, and start to apply the rules for all the code. And I think that the centralized systems itself need to design and accept and manage the rules, because it's good thing for itself.
I agree.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I participate in standards work, right, at the ISO level and here in Canada as well. And the basis between standards, global standards, is business adoption. And that's something I think we all need to do as an industry, is work towards more common language, right? We need to work together the same way, stop building our own separate language for everything that we do. In a supply chain context, we have different models. We have the UN model, we have the SCORE model, we have different models, but nobody can agree. Let's try to work together towards better business adoption, which will simplify everybody's life.
Yeah, 1,000% agree. And I love the context in blockchain where it's not necessarily even possible to break the concrete up. So, there's some implications there on, just the industry driving a need to actually have that. I would encourage, if you haven't, to go read the NIST software development framework. It is a great place to start. It's definitely moldable. Understanding, again, the widget that you're trying to bake before you bake it and what its needs are, definitely allow you to just take that as a framework and just start saying, okay, it has these elements, but I actually need more. It's a place to start. So I just highly recommend. It's in the end of my slide deck, the link to it. It's a great NIST publication, but it's worth having a cup of coffee and sitting on a Saturday morning in your free time reading through its guidance, because it is really good.
Awesome, thanks. Hey, Jennifer, nice to see you again. Jennifer has a question about quantum being quantum ready. How do you see digital agents as a possibility to be prepared for quantum? Randy, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So I guess it depends. The problem is, are they quantum safe, right? So the issue with quantum, and certainly digital agents can help, I think, prepare organizations and software designers and blockchain developers and things like that for quantum. But the problem will be when we get to the point where quantum is a reality and the quantum threats are posed, then what happens, right? Are our digital agents quantum safe? Are they leveraging quantum safe technologies and processes so they themselves are protected from that capability? That's the only. I don't see any disadvantage to starting to look at using different types of technologies and processes to start bringing us into that space where we are all speaking the same language and we're using the same sort of tools, and we're getting getting on the same sheet of music. We're not singing the same song necessarily, but at least we're trying to do things to the same beat. But digital agents can potentially help us get there. The issue is what happens when, right? And so when we're losing foresight, if we develop digital agents, are we using these standards? Are we preparing ourselves for the eventuality that these things might be vulnerable? Then what, right? So
Right.
I liked what was previously talked about with respect to the watermark that Christine brought up, and also the issue around centralization and decentralization that Michaela was bringing up. And I think that at the end of the day, having the common language, having an ability to make sure that we're all sort of moving in the same direction and trying to follow the same guidelines or standards to get to a place where we can be prepared for. We're not locking things down, but we're prepared for the eventuality, and we can plug in quantum safe requirements as we move along. Then that way the digital agent will survive, right? The problem is, will it survive? And I think there's a lot of competing areas out there, and they themselves have vulnerabilities, right? Depending on how it was constructed and what kind of issues there are with the algorithms that are driving them, right? So anyway, sorry, long answer for a good question.
Well deserved. All right, hold on, I have something here in the chat. Ready, I read something about Falcon systems Falcon system for Algorand quantum compliance. Do you have some information? Great question from Michele.
Not specifically on that. The NIST is working on has all the I think they've introduced a number of nominees or compliance standards requirements for quantum security, quantum safe. But I don't know what I don't know. I haven't dug deep enough into that, and I certainly don't remember names. Names and me don't get along anymore. I've passed that age point where names are actually part of my memory. So, but certainly on the NIST website, in the quantum safe, quantum resistant quantum project, the post quantum computing section of NIST. I should have put that in as a resource, I guess. They talk about the candidates and what's happening in that space. So yeah, sorry, I don't have an answer. Long answer to say I don't have an answer.
All right. Do we have any last questions with 1 minute to go? No raised hands, no Q&As, nothing in the chat. Folks, thank you very much for joining us today. We'll send out the recording, we'll send out the slides, a lot of great resources on those slides. Feel free to reach out, right, as required. Right, let's all make this a whole lot better. We have enough chaos in our supply chains these days, so we don't need all the bad people creating even more. So again, thank you very much. We look forward to chatting again on this very important subject, and enjoy the rest of your day. Andrea, any last thoughts before I close off this session? No last thoughts. Andrew, I think, was on the road today, so we'll catch up. So again, thank you very much, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the session, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.